I mean, it is really, really spicy, guys. Like, be careful. Don't just go like shove this in your mouth. But the flavor is freaking delicious.
It is so good. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Live Your Mission show, brought to you by Mission Meats, where our guests share their most actionable advice so that you can live a more mission-centered life. I'm your host, Peter Alwood, and today we are joined by Laura Lea Bryant. But before I get to that, here's what's going on over at Mission Meats headquarters. We're super excited because at the release of this episode, we will have just released our newest jerkies. They're 2 turkey jerkies. They're freaking delicious. Carne asada, sriracha, and they're so good, right? Just in time for the holidays, just in time for Thanksgiving. They're moist, tender. The carne asada is like, it is a jerky flavor you have never tasted. It is amazing. And so I think you're going to love it. Get on some of that. Another thing is, I want to stress that we want to feature people living their mission. And so if you know someone, or if it's you, tag a post on social with Live Your Mission, hashtag Live Your Mission, tag Mission Meats, and we will get you a shout out on an upcoming episode of the Live Your Mission show. All right. Now, on to Laura Lea Bryant. She is amazing. She's got a cookbook with another one that is going up for pre-order very soon, if not already, on Amazon. And she talks about her journey into food and cooking, and how, I mean, she started as she was a paralegal in New York City, experienced some anxiety, and through some just natural circumstances became a certified health supportive chef, and you'll learn what that means. And so she's got some great tips on mindset and on your kind of exploration into what is a good diet and a good meal plan, so to speak, for you. And so definitely listen for that. She crushes some Carolina Reaper on there. She loves the flavor, by the way. It's delicious. I told you. And answers some of our questions, a lot of our questions in the Reaper round. So without any further ado, I bring to you Laura Lea Bryant. Thank you. Laura, welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to chat. We'll jump right in with our typical first question, which is, when someone asks you what you do, what do you say?
I'm not sure is usually what I say.
Okay.
So I am a certified holistic chef, which is a really, really strange designation, but basically it means that I cook food that's healthy, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
And why are you working on this? Like, why is this your mission? Why are you the right person for the job? Maybe you can share that a little bit.
Yes. Yeah, that works. So I, about 8 years ago now, was living in New York City. I'd been there for a few years and I was having a really rough time. I had been kind of floating from one paralegal job to the next and hated it, felt totally misaligned, and was incredibly anxious. I've always been an anxiety-driven person, but it reached a real maximum when I was living in the city. I mean, I was spending thousands of dollars going to the ER thinking I was having a heart attack. I became very antisocial. I was having heart palpitations, all this crazy stuff. And at the time, I started cooking really honestly because I just couldn't afford to keep eating out all the time. So I stopped going out to eat, which meant I stopped drinking as much, and I had a lot more time on my hands. So I started going down to the Union Square Farmers Market and buying ingredients. And then I'd go to bookstores and, take pictures of recipes, and I started cooking. And about 6 months to a year into starting to cook for myself, for really the first time in my life, my anxiety symptoms decreased dramatically. It was wild. And at the time, I didn't really see a lot about mental health and food, a lot about that correlation. And to me, that was the coolest thing I'd ever experienced, that what I was eating could not just impact my, aesthetics, which we all know, but could impact my mental health. And I knew, I mean, when I started to piece it together, I knew that was what I wanted to do in some capacity for a living.
And you had no experience prior to this of cooking or chefing, or like, were you into food before?
I mean, I was into food, I think, just as much as anyone else. I did grow up in a very food centric home. My mom is an amazing cook. She's a better cook than I will ever be. And so we had home cooked meals essentially 365 days of the year. We had family dinner with really delicious food. So I was spoiled by food. And I also think subconsciously I made a lot of connections between food and safety and comfort and community. So in that way, but really between the, high school, college, it was not a thing for me. Now, when I started to realize the impact that cooking for myself was having on my mental health, I Googled healthy cooking schools one day. And it turns out there are two in the country that are like nationally accredited chefs training programs. So you get to be an actual chef,
Hmm.
but you also get this, health education. And one of them was in the city. It was, in my backyard in the Chelsea neighborhood. And so I went there, and immediately, as soon as I walked in, I knew it was where I wanted to be. And I enrolled a couple months later. So then I did go through an actual chef's training program. But the thing about culinary school, it was an amazing experience, especially this one specifically, because it's such a niche thing. But that's not what makes you a good cook. Cooking is the only thing that makes you a good cook. You don't come out of culinary school like really knowing what you're doing. Nobody does, because you only do everything once or twice, especially with my school, because we spend half the time. Oven, hold please.
And
Okay.
that's how we know she's a real deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Cooking and
Sorry about
podcasting.
that. Gotta follow the timer. It's my boss. So yeah. So I mean, I maybe did everything once when I was in school, and so I came out of it still not really knowing what I was doing. But I had a framework.
Hmm. So fast forward, you go from that to, how do you get here?
Yep.
How do you
So
get to launching a cookbook on Amazon and all the 5-star reviews and having a blog and a following and all that? Like, what happens between the discovery of the chef school and now?
mhm. So I like to call it the spaghetti tactic.
Hmm.
And that is essentially saying yes to everything, throwing it against the wall to see what sticks. And I mean, it's basically what I did. I graduated from school, moved back to Nashville, which is where I'm from, and reached out to anyone that was remotely in the food or wellness community in Nashville and asked them if I could work for them for free, whether it was a catering gig, teaching, private chefing, working in a restaurant. I just did a little bit of everything, doing one-on-one consultations. And Nashville's a very supportive community.
Hmm.
So sort of simultaneously, Nashville started supporting me and sharing about me. So that grew. So I grew through word of mouth, but I also honed in what I felt like I was good at and where I could add the most value. So it really took probably, I've been doing this now for 7 years.
Hmm.
It took about the first 3.5 years to really decide that what I think I'm best at and what I enjoy the most is specifically recipe development and writing, which is why the cookbook just seemed like the perfect opportunity. And I didn't have a product of any kind. You can't really, no one cares what you're doing in California if you don't have some product that they can buy in California, because they're not going to fly to Nashville for a cooking class. So it just made sense. It was a really good fit. And very serendipitously, a good friend of mine connected me with her publisher. She was like, I feel like, you guys would hit it off. So I met my publisher, who at the time was a small local publisher. And then, I didn't have to do a book proposal, nothing like that. They just gave me the opportunity. They let me run with it. I had no idea no idea. I didn't have a template or anything. I mean, I didn't even have a proposal. They said I could do my own photography, which is awesome. And then I wrote my book. And in the time I was writing my book, my publisher got purchased by, or I don't know the right legal term, but they became a part of the Ingram distribution network. So then my publisher had this great national distribution. And I asked for a really beautiful book. I wanted a hardback. I wanted a picture for every recipe. I wanted it to be flat lay. So any page is going to stay open. And other than that, the book exceeded, it exceeded my own expectations, honestly. I mean, I thought it was a good book, but I don't, I don't fully know why it took off the way that it did. I'm really grateful for it, but I don't really know why. I didn't have any marketing behind it.
Hmm.
So, but it was a good fit. And again, Nashville, blew it up, which was amazing. And throughout that process, I just so fell in love with the cookbook writing process that I knew that that was going to be the centerpiece of my business from now on.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So what is a health supportive chef? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think my job is to provide a little bit of something for everybody because it all comes down to bio individuality. And, some of my recipes are going to work for someone and not for another person. So to me, my job is to take really high quality ingredients. I think quality is the most important thing. I'm not opposed to, every now and again enjoying packaged food, or I think dairy can be really good for people in moderation, but and certainly I eat all animal proteins and that kind of thing, but it really does come down to the quality. So I would say that's like the umbrella under which everything starts, is the quality and where it's coming from. And then I just basically try to find things that are going to appeal to somebody who may not be familiar with healthy food, and might have some negative connotations about it. So I really focus on family friendly, comfort food inspired, childhood favorites, takeout favorites. And, I don't know, I'm not a purist, I'm not dogmatic. So I think I don't try to, if I'm going to take the dairy out of a recipe, I may make sure that it still has like some really good healthy fats, and I'm not afraid to use some salt and that kind of thing. And I think that's why I've been able to help people improve their health through my food, because it feels doable, and
Mhm.
enjoyable.
Yeah, it's got to feel like it can't feel daunting. Otherwise, people are
Right.
not going to tackle it. And then eventually you might go into the advanced level stuff, right? And start eating cow brain or whatever this stuff is,
Sure. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Do your thing.
But but you start with something that's similar, and then also you're talking about it being familiar. Tell me a little bit about high quality, right? And so, like my wife's very much obsessed with this. Clearly, we at Mission Meats are obsessed with it. You'll have folks that can't eat gluten in the States, but then they go overseas and they can eat all the gluten they want, right?
Yeah.
Or you have folks that can't handle cheese or dairy, and they'll have some like Amish, non-pasteurized stuff, and like it totally works for them. Let's talk a little bit about, I think, the importance of quality of food, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's the thing. It's not the same food.
Hmm.
It's literally not the same food. A piece of industrial beef and a piece of pasture raised beef is essentially, just in terms of like biomarkers, fatty acid profile, hormone, level and content, micronutrient content. It's just not the same. It just kind of looks the same. Although if you actually know what you're looking for, it doesn't really look the same.
Hmm.
So, that's the thing about quality. It's not even necessarily like some gradation, a hierarchy. It really is like there's really one way to do it depending on what you're talking about. And the rest is just, it's not necessarily harmful in small quantities, but it's certainly not going to add any value
Hmm.
in terms of nutrition, and in large quantities can be harmful. So, when it comes to any kind of red meat, beef, I want it to be 100% grass fed. For pork, I want it to be pasture raised.
Hmm.
Chicken, ideally, the best word really you can look for is pasture raised or free range. Those are sort of the best things that you can look for in terms of your label. Same with eggs. Um, Seafood, ideally wild caught for sure, but also sustainable. I think that's an important combination.
Hmm.
And then dairy, again, ideally you really want to look for that grass fed. And if you can get raw dairy, that's fantastic too, and fermented, even better.
Hmm. Talk a little bit about some of the things you've seen, like, clearly we're in the meat business, so we can talk meat, we can talk dairy, it doesn't matter. But, and even, my wife and I were talking about eggs recently. the health benefits of something that has been raised properly, like it used to be, versus something that is more commercialized. Do you have some examples that you want to share there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, with grass-fed beef, you're going to have a really nice amount of omega-3 fatty acids, which we need desperately for joint health, brain health, pretty much to make our bodies function properly. And we're not going to get nearly as many of the omega-6s that are in industrial beef, and that are also in basically every other food in the supermarket. And so, in a sort of like on its own, omega-6s are not terrible for you. We need to have some. It's just our ratio is so skewed. So that's really, really important, particularly for brain health, to be getting those kind of, and if you can do organ meats, like even better, because organ meats are not only going to have all those omega-3s, but they're also going to have so many minerals in them, which, most of us don't get enough minerals as well. And the other thing that's so cool about really good quality meat is that it's super bioavailable. So, we don't need to go down like the road of, plant-based eating and whatever, but I don't think there's any question in my opinion, from what I've seen in the research and that I've read, that our bodies really do well digesting and assimilating good quality meat. And, we have the enzymes to break it down, and we can very quickly absorb those micronutrients. So, those are just, some of the things. And, very similarly, like egg yolks, really good quality egg yolks are going to have incredible fats. The saturated fats that you get in a really good quality animal protein are also not going to be harmful the way that a saturated fat might be from a factory farmed animal. So,
Yeah, yeah, totally with you. Now, what do? You got to run into this all the time, Laura. Um, Conflicting information. Like you say one thing, and then somebody else that's a guru in it, they say something else, and they're all like conflicting. And I know plenty of folks that I've talked to, they just don't know what to do, because they're like, oh, I got a raw vegan telling me this, I've got carnivore diet person telling me that. Where do you stand on some of this stuff, in regards to maybe some of the fad diets that are out there that seem to come and go every decade, or even shorter than that, and some of the information that's conflicting?
yeah, that's such a good question. Here's the thing. You can make not only a verbal case, but a research backed case for almost anything if you really, really want to dig. Like, you can find some study from Norway in 1985 that supports that we should all just be eating cheese 24/7 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that comes down to, one, because, people doctor their experiments or whatever, but also comes down to what I was saying about bio-individuality. So for me, it's not so much deciding what's right or what's wrong, but it's taking the information in, cumulatively, assimilating it, and then discarding, when it comes to, for my body personally, discarding what I know science might not agree, but like I just feel like crap when I eat it or whatever. And that's what I would encourage people to do, is not get bogged down so much in all the different opinions, but to see it as an opportunity to do your own research, listen to your body, do some journaling, figure out what works for you, because there's such a wild variety when it comes to what works for the human body. And just literally myriad factors. I don't, age, DNA, and ancestry, like your microbiome, your immune system, where you grew up, how you grew up, your mindset, all of this stuff. So that's, for me, I don't let myself get too stressed about all the different research and opinions and that kind of thing, because they're probably not necessarily wrong. They're just wrong if they try to apply it to everybody.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that if you start with, like, because I'm glad you mentioned quality ingredients. I think if you start there, and then you start to add and subtract different ingredients in your diet and keep track of how you feel and how your body's responding to it, then you can find the right concoction, if you will, for your personal, bio individuality, as you say,
Yes,
right?
totally. And that's one of the reasons why being a chef and that chef component of it is so important to me, and how I present myself, because cooking is the best way to figure out what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
you can spend hundreds of dollars every month eating plant-based food from some fancy meal delivery service, and you may feel terrible. It's because you have no idea. You don't really know what's going into it, and you're also not adjusting it. You're not customizing it to your own body. So, I mean, we need to be cooking for ourselves, if for no other reason than to actually figure out what makes us feel optimally.
Hmm. So knowing what you know now and kind of thinking about your journey from start to finish with anxiety maybe being the starting point and then to what you've learned up to this point, what would you have done differently?
With my business or with my health?
I think maybe both.
So let's see. Health wise, I would say I would just have been less strict with myself, been a little bit more forgiving with myself. I definitely went through a period where I was very what is now termed orthorexic, where I wanted everything to be what in my mind fell into the category of healthy.
Mm.
But I'm with every passing day, I am truly believing that our mindset and our perspective around food and everything in our life actually probably trumps the content that we're putting in our body. Now, obviously, there's a threshold past which, like, that's not going to be true if you're eating Snickers all the time, but you have a really positive mindset. Um, but I think it needs to come first. And so for me, I wish I'd had a different mindset and a more chill, easygoing perspective about food and my relationship with my body, and a lot of that, on and off the wagon mentality that a lot of women and people in general suffer with, and the shame spiral and all of that. So
Hmm.
it's really, that's what I would say I would change in terms of my health, is my mindset. And then for business, I think the biggest thing, I haven't really, I thought about this. I haven't really had some, like, obviously major blunders, but the two things that I have struggled with is, one, undervaluing my services,
Mm.
and two, creating boundaries and saying no. And I know I'm not alone in those things, but those are ongoing issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have imposter syndrome. I do, for sure. So I've had a tendency to undervalue my services, and it doesn't help anyone, because, one, you don't get the demographic that you really want. Two, people aren't as invested in it when they don't pay what it's really worth. And three, then I'm resentful. So
Hmm.
it's really, and you don't want to get yourself in a cycle where, especially a city like Nashville, that's still really a small town in some ways. If I charge X amount for a cooking class, there people are going to know. I can't really bump up my prices without hearing from people about it, because they know what it was before.
Hmm.
And then saying no, yeah, I mean, we just have to create those boundaries, and we have to get comfortable being comfortable saying no.
Hmm.
It's really hard to do, but it is so incredibly valuable, because the mental, physical, and emotional space that you're going to create for yourself when you do that is going to end up benefiting the people whose lives you're trying to add value to anyway.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think there's one caveat to it, and I've thought about this a lot. Um, just kind of charting our history and my history in business. But you start by saying yes to everything, like you talked about earlier. Just kind
Yeah.
of because you're groping in the dark in the beginning, you don't really know exactly what avenue of health or chefing in this example you're going to be in, and so the only way you find out very quickly, or most quickly, is by just saying yes to everything, trying everything out, working for free, building a portfolio, and all that. The problem is that people stay in that mode for too long,
Mm-hmm.
and or imposter syndrome, right? And to define that for someone who doesn't know what that means, just means that you undervalue what you know because it's easy for you,
Mm-hmm.
and then you feel like, who the heck am I to be an expert or labeled an expert in this?
Totally.
Like, there's so many people that know so much more than me, right? And so, but the thing is like, you undervalue what you know because it came easy to you. You're like, oh, everybody else must know this, but they don't. And because of that, you don't end up charging as much. And so what's cool about it is that this probably happened with you too, is that in your timeline of saying yes to everything and working with as many people as possible, you also probably built a community of like-minded individuals that had more experience than you, that could say, Laura, no, you're not charging that. That is completely ridiculously underpriced. You're going to charge this, and this is why. And we've done that. I've done that with friends of mine that were, on a different part of the timeline than me, that would give me a proposal, and I'd say, no, you're not. I'm not
Mhm.
paying you that. That is ridiculously cheap. You need to
Mhm.
come back with another price. This is probably
Yeah.
what it should be, right?
So awesome. I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, that's a really good point. I sort of skipped over the first couple years where no was just not an option, you
Yeah.
know? So yeah, that's definitely a more recent problem. And it is really important, obviously, within the like within the framework of making sure that you feel really like whatever it is you're doing is safe and appropriate and all of that.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that's really true. There's
Yeah.
that initial yes period.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Just don't stay there too long, right? Because
Right,
you got to
exactly.
pay the bills, and you're not helping anybody by going out of business, right? So if you can, if you're
Right.
not charging enough, then you go out of business, and then now nobody learned anything, right?
And you don't have and you can't reinvest and and grow as well. So
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an old Zig Ziglar quote. It's one of my favorites, old motivational speaker. And he said, money's not that important, but it's relatively close to air. Like you need it. Like everybody's going
Right.
to hate on money, but
Yeah,
guess what? Without it, you can't do much.
totally. Totally.
All right.
It's just the game we're playing.
Totally. Okay. So last question, and then we'll move to our next round. For the listener that wants to live their mission, both I think in business, right? So sharing something that they're an expert in, especially if they're not doing it now. Some tips to them on kind of getting over the hump, and then also advice on the health side of things. Somebody who wants to live their mission out, be more healthy, feel more vibrant, start to experiment with eating differently. What's your practical tips or advice to them?
Yeah. So for somebody who might feel like they're kind of where I was when I was in New York, where I felt like I had something to give and didn't know
Hmm.
what it was, I think a really good place to start is, first of all, I'm not somebody who's just going to tell you, like, quit your job and go, I don't know, whatever, like immediately start pursuing this without any resources or outline whatsoever.
Hmm.
I think a really good place to start is asking yourself where you think you can add value and why you think someone would come to you for whatever it is over somebody else. Now, this is, I mean, that's, I guess, assuming that the person has some idea of what it is they like to do. So I guess you start there, figure out what is it that that really gets you out of bed in the morning. And it can be something kind of amorphous. You don't have to start with something really specific. But the following questions of how can I add value and why me over other people or businesses or whatever it is, those are really going to help you get super specific. And then you can act from there, and there's a million different ways that you can go about it, but I think that's a really good place to start. And then in terms of health, I would say, unless you're somebody who's currently really struggling with sort of like a disordered eating mindset, journaling is one of the best places you can start. Keeping a journal of what you eat and how it makes you feel. I know it's annoying and know it sounds trite or sort of like academic or something like that, but it is so unbelievably valuable, because after you do that for 3 or 4 weeks and look back, you'll start to synthesize all of these trends of where your energy dipped when you had X, Y, and Z and on a regular basis. Because for me to just say, I can't just sit here and say, I mean, sure, drink more water and like move your body, but there really isn't something I can say specifically to eat or drink or, how much or anything like that. I can't, there's nothing that's going to be a blanket statement for everybody. But if you do take the time to start tuning into your body and asking yourself, what did I have and how did it make me feel on a pretty regular basis, you're going to get, it's just a gold mine of information. And then also doing some journaling, some intention setting about, why you're doing it and whatever. I mean, and that's a different rabbit hole to go down. But I think that being able to reflect back on a pretty consistent basis is super powerful.
Yeah, I agree. Because I mean, you could think that you're eating a certain way or feeling a certain way, but when you start to see the trends written down on paper, you can realize how frequently maybe you're eating things that you didn't know you were eating or as
Right.
much, and then and how it's making you feel. You know.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Very good. And you wrote down what excites. Or I wrote down what excites you because you had stated that, and I was thinking back to your story of um, googling this, chef school. Now, you would never have searched for that if you hadn't been paying attention to the difference that had kind of the transformation in your life.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the things I want to stress to the audience is you have to be paying attention to what is bringing you some excitement, some joy, what you're
Yeah.
doing that will cause time to slip. We're like, oh my gosh, 2 hours just passed and I didn't
Yeah.
realize it because
I love that.
I was in the state, right?
Yeah.
You got to pay attention to that because otherwise you'll never know to search for it. Right? You never would have known to search for that school if you hadn't noticed how it had affected your life.
Totally. That's such a good point. As I think a great marker is when are you in flow state? And flow state is exactly what you just said, which is
Mm-hmm.
time flies. What is it that you do that makes time fly? Is a really, really good place to start. And also volunteering is an awesome way to start figuring out. Volunteer with a couple, in a couple different capacities in your community, and that's a free, easy way to adding value to somebody else's life, and it can really help you figure out what it is that makes you tick.
Yep. Yep. And final point I think on this is that friend of mine, Derek Sivers, he had stated like you don't need to make your art your business and vice versa, right? And so you could volunteer and it could bring so much joy to you that you're like, I can just keep doing my regular job, volunteer on the side. I don't need to make money doing that because it's bringing me so much joy. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and vice versa. Because his whole statement was, I know plenty of starving artists that want to make money, and I know plenty of people making money that want to become an
Yeah.
artist, right?
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. All right, cool. All right. Now we're going to switch gears to the Reaper round. And this is where our guests answer some rapid fire questions while they attempt to eat some of our Carolina Reaper jerky. Whole bag, one little tiny bite, somewhere in between, whatever you like. Are you ready?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Okay.
Let me get this sucker open.
Woo!
I mean, it smells great. It's just strong.
Very, very spicy. I'll let you take a bite. I'll ask you the question while you eat that. Favorite book could be something you have read in the last year or a classic for you. Could be business, could be health, could be neither of those two. What comes to mind?
So 2 books I've really been loving. One is Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed.
Okay.
And the second is When Breath Becomes Air by Atul Gawande.
Okay. What's the second one about?
So it's basically written by a man who is in the process of dying. And I believe he is a doctor, or I'm confusing that with, I don't know, but basically it's from the perspective of somebody who has a terminal illness. And it is beautifully written. And I think because the reader knows that from the beginning, you're just so, you're so present with it, and everything has a poignancy to it that it just wouldn't have otherwise,
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thoughtful. I like it.
It's very, it's amazing.
Awesome. Early or late riser? And what does that look like?
I would say I'm a medium riser. I get up probably around, I don't know, maybe 7:30 or 8, and then I go to bed at like 11. So I would say it's just somewhere in the middle.
Okay. And that's always worked for you?
No, I mean, it works for me, but I actually used to be much more of an early to bed, early to rise person. It's really only been in the last 2 years that I've started to shift that. And some of that was in response to struggling with some sleep issues for a while. And it was more mental. That really worked for me mentally.
Mm-hmm.
I had so many rough nights where I woke up before the sun came up that I get like a little bit of trauma when I wake up when it's still really dark.
Yeah.
So I like to wake up when the sun is shining.
Got it. Okay. Very good. Any quotes you live by?
Yes. So the first one is do it anyway.
Okay.
And the second one is the question, which I've talked about, which is how can I, in any situation, if I'm not sure what to do, just ask myself, how can I add value to this? Or how can I make this better?
Okay. And what does the do it anyway mean to you?
To me, the do it anyway comes into play when it's something, it really just comes into play when I'm afraid of something. When it's a fear-based decision, now you need to kind of like get your gut involved, because you do want to have that instinct that it's the right move. But once you have that sense of, I really do want to do it, do it anyway, even if you're afraid.
Okay. It's kind of getting over the fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Knowing it's something you probably need to do, but at the same time, you've got some fear to get over.
Exactly.
I totally get that. Best under $100 purchase that has impacted your life recently?
Yeah. So going back to my sleep issues, I bought a blackout mask from Amazon. It's like cotton mask.
Okay.
It has become like my lovey. I'm obsessed with it. I look for it immediately. I love to hold on to it. But it really is incredible for travel or just different times of the year or whatever. It really does just like completely block things out, and it just helps me sleep so much better. And really at the end of the day, there's not much more important. So
Sure. You feel like you fall asleep faster with it?
fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, get back to sleep easier in the middle of the night.
Okay. All right, cool. I need that. In the
Yeah, I'll
last
send you the link, the specific link.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life? Or to say it a different way, um, what have you changed your mind about? Something you thought was untrue before that you feel like is absolutely true now?
Yes. So I would say I've had a lot of self-limiting beliefs as a woman about making money.
Hmm.
And I really had to get over that and work through that and change my mindset and perspective to one in which I embrace it. I not only think I am worthy of making money, and that I can, but also that it can actually be helpful. Going back to what we were saying about keeping business alive,
Sure.
and being able to reinvest and grow and all of that. So that's been super powerful for me.
Very good. Very good. What's next for you?
So my second cookbook is coming out in April.
Awesome.
My second born child, and that's really my main focus now. It's pretty much done. I have to do like one more nose to tail of it, and then we'll send it to the printer. And then I'm going to spend the next few months getting my tour together, and all the events for that will be kind of a part-time job. But yeah, second book. And then, I'm still teaching classes, which is one of my favorite ways to connect with people. And frankly, after this book comes out and I do that tour, I'll probably start on book 3. So
Very good. That's exciting. Congratulations. We'll definitely
thank
promote
you.
that on the show. Um, Last two questions here. What should I have asked you about that I didn't?
My cat, because she's really, really cute. Usually she comes and clacks on the computer when I'm doing interviews, but she didn't. No, I mean, the truth is, had we not touched on the mindset stuff, I would have brought that. That's what I would say, but we really did. I mean, because to me, it's just the way of the future.
Hmm.
Um, you have to get your mind right before anything else, because there's just no band-aid for it. So
Hmm. Yeah,
I feel like
gotta
we
get the
did a
mind.
good job with that.
Gotta get the mind right. And finally, your favorite Mission Meats flavor.
This one. No, actually, well, the jalapeno beef, because I do really like spicy food.
Okay.
Um, but honestly, this may trump it. I mean, it is really, really spicy, guys. Like, be careful. Don't just go like shove this in your mouth. Mm. But the
It is,
flavor is freaking delicious.
it is so good.
The
It's very
spices
good.
are unbelievable. So
It's
yeah,
very
I don't
good.
know. They might be neck and neck.
Okay, awesome. Well, Laura, thanks so much for taking the time. I know that it's
My pleasure.
precious. And if someone wants to connect with you or follow what you're doing, what's the best way?
Yep. Really, probably Instagram. I'm there most of the time. It's at Laura Lea Balanced, and the Lee is spelled Lea.
Hmm.
Or you can send me an email through my website, which is just llbalanced.com.
Very good. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Take care. It's been fun. Thanks so much for tuning in. It means so much to me and the entire Live Your Mission team. Now, this is the point where I ask you to subscribe, leave a review, share the show with a friend. Would you do that for me, please? It's super helpful. Helps us grow the show, helps us bring you better guests, helps us not have to have advertising on here, all that good stuff. So what do you say? Help me out. Share the show, please. Okay. Now, we're also putting out content for viewers and listeners like you have told us what they want, right? You told us what you want, and we're bringing it to you, okay? So if there's something that you want, either a topic or a person or something you want to learn about, whatever, I guess it's the same thing as a topic. Shoot me an email, peter@missionmeats.co. That's peter@missionmeats.co. And I'll see what I can do. I think I can do it for you. I probably can. You never know. So shoot me an email. And if you want to be part of the Mission Reaper Challenge, tag us. Post some stuff of you eating it. And if it's hilarious, if we love it, if it's creative, if it's all those things, we will pick you. I will talk about you on the show, and you will win $100 in free Mission Meats delicious snacks. So give that a shot. All right. All right. Now get out there and live your mission. Thank you.